My husband cheated on me. His mistress, feeling pretty smug, lounged on my bed and sent me a photo. Your husband is sleeping so soundly in my arms. I just smiled and didn't reply. Instead, I turned to find her current boyfriend. I not only wanted to socially destroy her but send them both to hell. On our anniversary, I prepared a feast and gifts, planning to surprise my husband, Leo. Little did I know, it would turn into the darkest day of my life. My name is Wendy. I'm an ER doctor. I went through a lot of trouble to get a day off, just for this anniversary. But as the food got cold, Leo still hadn't come home. No replies on Instagram, no answer on his phone. Outside, clouds gathered and the wind howled, rattling the windows. I got worried, called again. Just before the ringtone ended, he answered. Don't wait for me for dinner. You eat first. B0125. Please go to CT room 2. Are you at the hospital? Are you hurt? The familiar robotic announcement voice sent a chill down my spine. I blurted out, are you at our hospital? Don't come here. Before Leo could finish, I hung up and hurried to the hospital. On the way there, my mind raced with all kinds of horrible thoughts. Where was he hurt? His head? His chest? Was it serious? Why didn't he call me first thing? I'm an ER doctor. Since we got married, whether it's his issue or a relative's, Leo always tells me right away. Or did he get into another fight with a random stranger? He has road rage. So maybe he hit someone and was too scared to call me after. When I got to the CT room and saw Leo unharmed, I finally relaxed. As long as he was okay. But what I saw next made me freeze. There was my husband, gently wiping the tears of a young woman, his tone soft and comforting, telling her everything would be okay. After saying that, he lightly patted the back of her head. What are you guys doing? I was furious, stepping forward to confront them. Leo looked briefly flustered, but quickly regained his composure, sounding annoyed. Didn't I tell you not to come? You don't answer messages or calls. What's wrong with you? The weather was awful today, with strong winds. On the way here, I almost got into an accident, but instead of comforting me, he scolded me. The tension was palpable. His anger made my nose sting with the urge to cry. It felt like I was the one at fault. The girl next to him shakily stood up, desperately trying to explain. Sis, I'm really sorry. Please don't misunderstand. The wind was so strong today. As soon as I stepped out of the office, I got hit by a falling sign. Leo happened to see it and insisted on taking me to the hospital. Only then did I notice a small bruise on her forehead. Her face was pale and terrified, as though I was bullying her on purpose. She was young, pretty, and pitiful. She worked at Leo's company. I think her name was Sandy. Towards the end, Sandy even sounded like she might cry. She looked at Leo cautiously. Leo, you should explain. Don't let an outsider like me affect your marriage. I noticed that while saying this, Sandy lightly tugged at Leo's sleeve. Leo frowned, looking impatient. What's there to explain? There's nothing between us. Wendy, why are you making a scene? He glared at me. He seemed genuinely angry. Was I really misunderstanding the situation? Or was he using his anger to hide his guilt? My heart felt heavy and painful, like a stone was crushing it. This was the first time he'd been so harsh with me since we met. And it was all because of a perfect stranger. Their little gestures and glances grew bigger and more obvious in my mind. Leo's inexplicable anger cooled down my emotions, making me realize that his behavior today was far from normal. But I had no concrete evidence. If I kept pushing about their ambiguous relationship, I'd be the one in a more vulnerable position. And Sandy wasn't someone to mess with. I pushed down my frustration, took Leo's arm, and smiled at Sandy. I trust my husband's character. Just don't misunderstand. But you have to understand, my husband has one flaw. He's too kind-hearted and doesn't know how to refuse people. Without giving Leo a chance to react, I pulled him away. As we left, I saw Sandy's previously innocent and pitiful expression turn sour. Once you plant a seed of doubt, it will grow and flourish on its own. I needed time to investigate and verify. Once out of the ER entrance, I let go of Leo's arm and hurried towards the car. I couldn't keep pretending. Big raindrops started to fall, chilling me both outside and inside. Leo kept pace, jogging to catch up, more frustrated. Wendy, haven't you had enough? Think about how awkward it's going to be for me and my colleague to work together now. I kept my face forward, walked faster, and angrily opened the car door. Just as I was about to drive off, Leo snatched the keys from me. His expression was stern, but his tone softened. You've already offended her and embarrassed her. That's enough. We've already gone through this whole scene. Was it really necessary? But I still had that burning anger inside me. Why had a situation that should have been his fault turned into me being dramatic and unreasonable? Throughout it all, he never considered my feelings. I moved to the passenger seat, slammed the door, and buckled my seatbelt. The wind outside had died down a bit, but the raindrops pelted the windows, making a racket that mirrored my turbulent thoughts. Maybe I was really misunderstanding him. After all, he's tall, handsome, mature, responsible, and has a decent job. It's only natural that a young girl might find him attractive, as long as he knew his boundaries and handled things appropriately. Marriage is easy, maintaining a marriage is hard. Every couple must take it one step at a time and cherish what they have. But what he said next shattered all the good feelings I had about him. She's just a pitiful kid with a rough background. You don't need to take it seriously with her. She's pretty naive. Everyone in the company treats her like a little sister. I glanced sideways at Leo. Does treating her like a sister include head pats? She sneaks peeks at you, pulling at your shirt, and her eyes show how much she admires you. Do you think I'm blind? I recalled the moment they shared earlier. The anger I'd barely managed to suppress flared up again. She has a boyfriend, all right. Stop overthinking and making up stories in your head. Leo's face turned cold. He stepped on the gas and the car shot forward. His driving got faster and faster, ignoring the terrible weather and poor visibility outside. Suddenly, a sharp brake nearly made me hit my head. Luckily, I was wearing a seatbelt. But before I could react, he rolled down the window, letting in the cold wind and raindrops as he started cursing. Are you trying to get yourself killed, crossing the street like that? Luckily, the brakes worked in time, and no one was hurt, though the other person was clearly scared. I quickly got out of the car to check on the other person. Are you all right? Do you need to go to the hospital? It was a middle-aged woman. Even though she wore a raincoat, her face and legs were soaked by the rain. She hastily shook her head and bowed in apology. I'm so sorry. There's an emergency at home. I thought crossing quickly would save time. I didn't mean to be reckless. After apologizing, she rode off hurriedly on her electric bike. Getting back into the car, my heart was still pounding. Leo's face remained dark with anger. He didn't speak or look at me, driving a bit slower now. As the sky darkened, I stared out the window, lost in thought. If he hadn't braked in time, or if the other person wasn't in a rush, things could have turned ugly. If it was a burly guy instead of a middle-aged woman, even if she was at fault for jaywalking, the consequences would have been unimaginable. And all of this was because of his irrational fury, clearly performed for my benefit. If I kept nagging about his flirtations, who knows if he would have crashed the car on purpose. By doing this, he could scare me into submission, shifting my focus away from his actions. Afterwards, he would casually excuse himself. You provoked me. You know I have road rage. He knew me too well, playing my psyche perfectly. But his selfishness and coldness caught me off guard, and made me break out in a cold sweat. It felt like I never really knew this man. For the sake of both our lives, I had to suppress my anger, let go of my doubts, and hide all my unhappy feelings on this stormy night. Back home, Leo noticed the food and cake on the table and finally realized it was our first wedding anniversary. I had the day off, so when I got up in the morning, I asked him, do you have any plans for dinner tonight? If not, let's eat at home. He agreed without hesitation. I thought he was pretending not to know to surprise me, but he had actually forgotten. I had happily prepared surprises and gifts for him. Now it all seemed absurd and laughable. Darling, I'm sorry. We were both too sensitive today. Leo tried to approach me for a hug, but I sidestepped. A hint of guilt flashed across his face. I'll heat up the food and cut the cake. We ate in silence, both lost in thought. The reheated food was nothing like fresh out of the pot, much like our marriage. This was our first wedding anniversary, often called the paper anniversary. Is our marriage really as fragile as paper? After showering, I lay in bed, pretending to be asleep. Soon, I heard the sound of a medicine bottle being opened. It was the melatonin pills he never missed, usually taken 5 hours before bed. But tonight was later than usual. After a while, I felt the mattress dip slightly. I didn't dare move, trying to keep my breathing even. Leo leaned over to kiss me, but when I didn't respond, he pulled back. We both knew neither of us was actually asleep. Eventually, Leo's breathing became steady and deep, indicating he was in a deep sleep. But my mind was wide awake. The seeds of doubt planted in my heart kept me tossing and turning. I knew I had to do something. I pretended to shift in my sleep, accidentally draping my leg over Leo. He was asleep so soundly, he didn't react at all. Carefully, I grabbed his phone from the bedside table and tiptoed out of the bedroom, heading to the study. I thought it would take some effort to unlock his phone, but surprisingly, his password hadn't changed. I hesitated a bit. Maybe I was just being overly sensitive. Taking a deep breath, I decided to check. If I ended up being wrong, I could apologize later. I scrolled through his messages, searching for keywords like miss you, love you, good night, and hotel. Apart from our conversations, there was nothing suspicious. Looking at his transaction history, There were no strange transfers or red envelopes. His wallet details showed no odd activity. I checked his photo albums and Instagram. No suspicious or intimate photos. Maybe I was overthinking things. I sighed in relief. In his company group chat, I found Sandy's contact. Leo saved her Instagram name with her full name, and everything seemed normal. But why were all their messages deleted? And why was their chat set to do not disturb? This seemed too suspicious. I closed my eyes, trying to relax, but my mind kept replaying the moments at the hospital. Leo's gentle, doting look at Sandy, her shy tug at his shirt, her longing gaze as I led Leo away. These scenes looped in my mind like a heavy weight on my chest, suffocating me. Even though there were no incriminating messages, I felt a deep sense of disappointment and frustration. The air around seemed thin and suffocating. I couldn't calm down at all. After a deep breath, I opened my eyes to turn off my phone and spotted the shopping app just as I was about to exit. On a whim, I opened the app and checked his pending deliveries, payments, reviews, and my orders. Everything seemed normal. Is he hiding too well, or have I really misunderstood? My finger lingered on a random past order. A pair of shoes he bought recently. I looked at it mockingly. Maybe I'm just too sensitive. When I exited, I accidentally pressed more in the bottom left corner, and a delete order option popped up unexpectedly. I clicked on it impulsively, and a dialog box appeared, asking, "Confirm delete this order. It can be recovered from the order recycle bin on the computer." A bad feeling crept over me. I turned on the computer, my palms slightly sweaty. The faint sound of the computer tower made me both nervous and wary. I glanced at the study door, hearing nothing, but I still wasn't reassured. I took off my shoes, left the study, and tiptoed to the bedroom door, which I had left cracked open earlier. Leaning against the wall, my palms were getting sweatier, and my heart pounded loudly in my ears. I held my breath and listened carefully. The bedroom was filled with Leo's snoring, rising and falling. I quietly retreated back to the study. I logged into the app on my computer, opened my orders, found the order recycle bin, and restored the deleted order. Then I opened my orders again. Lines of purchase history appeared before me, and I was stunned. Luxurious and beautiful couple rings that I had never worn. Various luxury handbags I'd never seen. Sets of sexy clothes, not my style at all. My mind automatically painted scenes of these items, sweet, warm, exciting, crazy. My hand, clutching the mouse, shook. From dating, falling in love, getting engaged, to marrying, even after a year of marriage, all the trust and feelings crumbled into pieces. I covered my mouth, not daring to cry out loud. I even regretted opening his phone. If only he had changed his password. 5 minutes later, I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and regained my usual calm. I knew now wasn't the time to break down. I needed to preserve evidence. He had hidden it so well. I had to be fully prepared. I picked up my phone and took pictures of each historical order, then recorded a video. While doing this, my hands trembled uncontrollably. My heart pounded. I then noticed that some of the recipients, phone numbers, and addresses for these items weren't my husband's, mine, or even his workplace's. It could only be his mistress. I saved her phone number and went on Instagram, trying to search for it. The resulting image was an anime picture, identical to the one saved as Sandy in my husband's phone. However, the Instagram name was Rainy for You. Everything was clear now, and my world, my marriage, began to collapse. I deleted each historical order record one by one. With each deletion, my heart bled, just like their betrayal of my marriage and the insult to my intelligence. The system automatically moved them back to the order recycle bin. I cleaned up and returned to the bedroom. That rising and falling snoring was particularly grating on my ears. I lay back on the bed, and he murmured in his sleep, calling me darling, stretching his hand over to hold me. It was his little quirk. He'd always pull me into his arms in the middle of the night, especially when we weren't getting along. That moment of close skin contact felt like becoming part of him, and all my anger would vanish without a trace. But this time, I knew we'd never go back to how we were. Instinctively, I edged towards the side of the bed, almost falling off. He didn't touch me, turned over, and fell back asleep. Looking at his familiar back, he seemed both strange and disgusting to me. I couldn't understand why he would cheat. I have a pretty face, and with makeup, I'm considered quite attractive. I'm gentle, kind, have a career, can handle social occasions, and cook well. We met through a blind date, but had a year-long observation period. He's mature, steady, tall, and handsome, and deeply affectionate and romantic towards me. He even said meeting me felt like it was too late in life. We had love and were soulmates. Entering marriage was a thoughtful decision, a natural progression. Before getting our marriage license, I even jokingly told Leo that if he ever loved someone else, I'd let him go. But just tell me beforehand, even a second before he falls out of love. He patted my head indulgently. Darling, loving you for a lifetime isn't enough. But after just a year of marriage, how ridiculous and ironic. He could stop loving me and love someone else, but he should never have betrayed our love, our marriage, cheating on me behind my back. His snoring gradually quieted down. At this moment, I even felt like strangling him, but then I thought, it's not worth it to ruin myself over someone like him. But letting him go just like that felt too easy. A fire of anger surged in my heart, making me toss and turn. But I had to sleep. Only by getting enough rest could I have the energy to plan carefully and make him pay the deserved price. That night, I had countless nightmares, but at least I slept some. The next morning, I made a simple breakfast and sat at the dining table, finding everything tasteless. I knew I'd have to live with a mask on from now on. Divorce was a recurring thought in my dreams, but such a major decision, how would I explain it to my parents? They're old. What if they couldn't handle the shock? Why are you up so early? Leo was half asleep, yawning continuously, and tried to hold me. I stiffened and my body instinctively rejected him. Looking a bit disappointed, he gave me a good morning kiss on the forehead. Still mad about yesterday? His deep voice with a hint of coaxing, eyes full of affection, seemed so ironic to me. But fearing to alert him, I bore my disgust and managed a smile. He counted on me not being able to resist his affection, but that was before he crossed my line. If you wholeheartedly love and protect me, I don't care if you're rich or poor, human or ghost. But if you treat me like this, I'll make sure you're worse than a ghost. When you get time off, let's celebrate our wedding anniversary properly and maybe have a baby. He sat down and started eating, eyeing me. When we got married, he said he wanted to focus on his career for another 2 years and pay off the mortgage before having kids. He didn't want me or the child to suffer. I was moved then, and even took on the task of paying off the mortgage with him. The house was a pre-sale. It hadn't been delivered yet. Bought before the wedding, he had only made the down payment. The house wasn't ready to move in, and the mortgage needed to be paid every month. A lot of pressure. With the pandemic, I didn't want him under too much stress. Besides, we were married and would be together for life. Being too precise about things would only hurt our relationship. Now, I'm incredibly grateful he postponed having children. My emotions were mixed, but I couldn't let him see any clue. Forcing a smile, I thought for a bit before responding. We're short-handed in the department. Dr. Emma is about to give birth, and will be on maternity leave soon, so she can't take night shifts. Our plans would at least have to wait another 6 months. I sensed a sigh of relief from him, but he was still unhappy. Does your workplace even care about human rights? They even want to control when you can have kids. I smiled awkwardly. You know the nature of emergency medicine. Pregnancies have to be reported in advance. Okay, 6 months then. If you get pregnant, stop working immediately. You guys are too exhausted every day. The child can't be at risk. I'll support you. I nodded and smiled, finally ending the topic. I've never loved the emergency department's unspoken rules as much as I do now. 6 months is enough time. After breakfast, I was washing dishes in the kitchen. Leo was very attentive, helping with everything. In the past, I'd have felt very happy, but now, I only felt indifference. Suddenly, he hugged me from behind, resting his chin on my neck. Babe, I'll make it up to you when we're off. I didn't respond. In his eyes, I was still holding a grudge. Actually, there's something I wanted to discuss with you. Our 2-bedroom apartment is too small. If you get pregnant, and my mom comes to help, it'll be crowded. I didn't turn around, continuing to wash dishes, but I knew my grip on the plate hurt. What do you think? He didn't notice my discomfort, and his tone was slightly excited. I checked out a 4-bedroom place recently. Great location, and in a school district. How about we sell this apartment to make a down payment? Turns out, all the morning's niceties were leading up to this. The apartment Leo and I currently lived in was a wedding gift from my parents. Since Leo's wedding apartment wasn't ready, my parents didn't want me to suffer, so they told everyone it was bought by Leo's family. In the year we've been married, my parents never mentioned it again. They treated him like half a son, believing that being kind to the son-in-law meant being kind to their daughter. But they forgot some people are ungrateful and calculative. If I didn't know about his affair, I would have naively agreed, making premarital property into marital property. We're a couple, everything should be shared. Current house prices are below 10,000 per square meter. Wouldn't it be too much pressure? Besides, we haven't finished paying off your mortgage yet. Will the bank approve a loan? Suppressing my anger, I pretended to hesitate. I did the math. This apartment can sell for over 800,000. We still need about 600,000. Even with our savings, there's a gap. Maybe ask your parents. If you're pregnant, moving and renovating will be bad for the baby. Besides, my place won't be ready until 2 years later. The place I saw is great. It has schools nearby, convenient for the child's future. As he spoke, he kissed my face. His flattery was obvious. When he said parents, he meant mine, not his. I need to think about such a big decision. I couldn't hide the coldness in my expression, and my tone wasn't pleasant. All right, I'm off to work. After Leo left, I wiped where he kissed me in disgust, letting the faucet water run, having no heart to wash the dishes. My heart sank. He had planned everything, using the child and the school district to lure me, even intending to count on my parents. I'm grateful I checked his phone last night. Otherwise, I would still be helping him blindly. I even started doubting if his reason for marrying me was truly our soul connection, as he claimed. When we got married, my parents complained about his apartment issue. I didn't care back then. I even naively thought of putting his name on my parents' pre-wedding property, to show my unwavering love. I trusted my judgment since we were so happy together. My brother disagreed, calling me foolish. We had a big fight, and I thought he was jealous. In the end, my parents made a compromise. If 3 years passed and I still wanted it, they wouldn't object. Was he really in such a hurry? Or was I too blind? Or was he too good at hiding? I turned off the faucet, grabbed my bag, and drove to my brother's place. I had the night shift today, free during the day to rest, as I needed to work from 6:30 p.m. to 8 a.m. the next day. I drove slowly the whole way. I don't want to sit around and do nothing, but I'm a bit hesitant. After all, before the wedding, my brother remained neutral about my marriage to Leo. Standing downstairs in his apartment complex, I fidgeted and looked down, struggling with myself. Should I tell him or not? As I was wavering and feeling at a loss, my brother came back from outside, wearing big shorts and a tank top, carrying breakfast. He dragged me inside and sensed something was wrong. He dropped his usual playful and carefree attitude and looked very serious. What's going on? Leo, he cheated. As soon as I said it, I couldn't hold back my tears. My brother threw the breakfast on the floor, stormed into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and rushed out the door. I held on to him with all my strength, almost losing all my energy, crying out, "Bro, I don't have a home anymore. Can you please not make things worse?" My brother paused, threw the knife on the ground, and angrily paced the living room. For a long time, "Wendy, if you forgive him, don't call me your brother anymore." He was very worried, but I could see he was trying hard to control his emotions. My brother Mike is 30 this year, 3 years older than me, but since we were kids, he took pleasure in teasing and bullying me. He's a bit of an oddball, still committed to being single at 30. He says he hasn't met a girl he's willing to spend his whole life with and doesn't want to settle. I teased him about marriage phobia. Today, I understand, he's clear-headed. He can bully me, but he won't tolerate anyone else doing it. The house, were you scammed out of it? I shook my head without speaking. At least you have some sense. So, what do you want to do next? Mike pulled me onto the sofa and wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes. Crying won't solve anything. After saying that, his eyes turned red. I don't want to let him get away with it. My nose tingled, but I held back my tears, clenching my fists so tight that my nails dug into my palms, almost drawing blood. I want to make him go to hell. I've never been so determined. Mike, can you do me a favor? Mike nodded solemnly. In all the years I've known him, he's rarely been this serious and earnest. And don't tell Mom and Dad. During my night shift, I sent Leo a message. I told him to come with me to my parents' house the day after my shift and my day off. He was very happy. He thought I was going to work on my parents about the house. In reality, I wanted to use these 2 days to calm down and think about how to get back at him. Though Mike usually seemed carefree, he worked very hard when he got serious. Just like his business, which has held up decently over the years, especially during the pandemic. Despite his own connections and resources, when he placed a thick stack of documents in front of me, I was still amazed at his efficiency. Sandy has an older sister and a younger brother. When she was 4, due to family poverty and her parents' preference for boys, she was given to relatives and wasn't claimed back until she was an adult. She's suspicious, sensitive, and vindictive, always drained by her original family and brother, but she seems to enjoy it. She now has a fiancé with detailed information about him, his phone number, and Instagram handle included. I did hear Leo mention Sandy's unfortunate background, low education, and frequent mistakes when she first joined the company, always making him clean up after her. At the time, I advised him that young girls have it tough and that newcomers always have a learning curve. so they need guidance and care. Just like us, fresh out of med school, knowing nothing until teachers and senior doctors patiently taught us to diagnose and treat patients. Later, he mentioned the girl less frequently, which I never thought about too much. I never imagined he was taking care of her so well that he ended up in bed with her. Her background is pitiful, but that doesn't justify her interfering in my marriage. As I flipped through the documents, I found her medical records. On a whim, I logged into the clinic's electronic medical record system. Even though we're in a small town, I work at the best hospital here. When people are sick, they usually come to us first. I opened the appointment print tab, adjusted the time frame to a year, and entered Sandy's name. Several records came up, and I matched them by age and ID number, printing out the relevant ones. At that moment, I was grateful for the hospital's policy of granting the emergency department access to all medical records. Due to the sudden and complex nature of emergency work, the emergency department is allowed to print medical records aside from the main office. I carefully examined the records. Sandy had multiple gynecological visits for menstrual pain and several ENT visits for nosebleeds, with short intervals in between. Suddenly, I remembered how Leo took melatonin every day. My mind quickly formed a nearly perfect plan for revenge. I want them to fall into ruin and despair forever. As soon as the early shift ended, I left work right away. Today, I'm going to see someone, Howard, Sandy's current fiancé. When I first saw him, he looked just as described, a simple, honest, and somewhat awkward technician. When I laid all the evidence before him, his face twisted in disbelief. He claimed I was slandering his girlfriend, and refused to believe Sandy could do such a thing. I guess, at this moment, your girlfriend is still at my house. I felt both sympathy for the man in front of me and a sense of irony for myself. Did you install surveillance? Howard asked, still clinging to hope. The whole thing happened too suddenly. I didn't have time to set up surveillance. I sighed helplessly. So, it's all your speculation. I trust my girlfriend. I won't let a stranger's baseless accusations affect our relationship. Seeming to muster a lot of courage, Howard finally spoke. I took out my phone and opened the app for my smart body fat scale, skipping past the basal metabolic rate, fat rate, and muscle rate. I focused on the time and weight shown on the screen. Last night at 8 p.m., 45 kilogram. At 11 p.m., 46 kilogram. This morning at 7:30 a.m., 44 kilogram. Last night, they must have had a late night snack or something. If you still don't believe me, you can call to confirm. I looked at Howard calmly. He went from disbelief to hesitation and doubt. After 2 minutes, he finally took out his phone and dialed a number, putting it on speaker. "What's up?" a sweet and lazy female voice answered, with a touch of playfulness. It was definitely Sandy. "Isn't today the weekend? I miss you. Let's meet up." Howard was testing the waters, but I could tell he still had a sliver of hope. "But I have a cold. Wait a few days until I feel better, and I'll come find you. I don't want to get you sick," Sandy said, deliberately sniffing and coughing twice. "Then I'll come to your dorm and bring you some medicine." Howard's face started turning cold as he said this. No need. I've gone back home. I'll come see you after work on Monday, okay?" Sandy tried to cover it up, but we both heard the trace of panic in her voice. "All right, I'll be working overtime these 2 days too. See you Monday," Howard said and hung up. She said she went back home, not that she was at home. A trace of sadness appeared in Howard's eyes, as if talking to himself. "Why are you telling me this? Why do you have a scale at home?" "The scale is because I might want to get pregnant in the future. So I got this smart body fat scale. I hoped for better quality embryos, but it turned out to be useful in this situation. I wanted to save my marriage, but your girlfriend doesn't seem to think so." While saying this, I secretly pinched my thigh to squeeze out some tears, making myself look like a desperate woman trying to hold on to her husband. In this society, men cheating can usually be forgiven by most women. But if a man is betrayed, almost no one can forgive it, regardless of their wealth, job, or social status. "Take me there," Howard said, and I still looked sad on the outside, but inside, I was smiling. People are strange creatures. No one wants this to happen to them. At first, they deny it, but once confirmed, their curiosity and even desire for revenge grow exponentially. The one who breaks the rules, in choosing the excitement, automatically ignores the consequences of breaking the exclusivity of love. They even arrogantly think they've hidden it well. How could they be discovered? I gently turned the doorknob, and what I saw in the living room is something I'll never forget for the rest of my life. Sandy was wearing my dress. They were disheveled and flushed, about to proceed. Perhaps they heard a noise and turned their heads simultaneously. Our eyes met. I already knew Leo was cheating, and I was prepared on the way here. I even persuaded Howard to just bring his girlfriend home. But seeing them shamelessly and blatantly nestling on my sofa was still hard to accept. Life is too melodramatic and cruel. Leo hurriedly pulled up his shorts, and Sandy froze in place, stunned. Before I could react, I saw a figure quickly rush past me, followed by a loud slap sound. Howard had slapped Sandy hard. Then he roared angrily, "Weren't you supposed to have a cold? Weren't you supposed to be back home? Let me explain. There's a misunderstanding here." Sandy didn't even bother covering her face, frantically arranging her dress and stuttering while speaking. But halfway through her explanation, she couldn't keep lying and changed the topic. "This is the first time I was forced into it." That sentence was like a bomb. Howard immediately turned on Leo, raining punches and slaps on him. Leo was confused and ashamed at first, but quickly fought back. The two men wrestled fiercely. Punches and kicks flew. As the fight grew more intense, they started grabbing objects within reach. The scene was chaotic. The glass on the coffee table shattered on the floor with a crisp sound. I took out my phone and began recording. It was a pity that although I had prepared a voice recorder the previous day and charged it, I didn't use it because the scene was too sudden when I entered. I forgot to use my phone at that moment. Now, Howard was like an enraged beast, eyes bloodshot. Even with Sandy clinging to him, Leo was at a disadvantage. After all, Howard was younger and stronger, and his anger was his best stimulant. Sandy, caught in the middle, tried to stop both, only to find herself getting hurt instead. Two men in a fit of rage blamed her for everything. Whomever she sided with, she was wrong. In a short time, the living room was a mess. The door wasn't closed. The noise of the fight attracted neighbors who crowded the doorway, discussing the scene. Some recorded videos, while others called the police, adding more chaos. Finally, exhausted, Howard and Leo had to stop fighting. Howard, as the victor, showed no joy, still breathing heavily in rage, glaring at Sandy curled up in the corner, as if wanting to tear her apart. Sandy buried her head in her knees, trembling, crying softly like she had suffered immense harm. Leo, like a defeated rooster, panted heavily, with his forehead swollen, bruises all over, but his nose miraculously unscathed. On the way over, I casually mentioned to Howard that I'd seen plenty of fights in the ER where the fighters were pretty skilled. They managed to give the other person a rough time, vent their anger, but not cause themselves too much trouble. Just a minor injury charge. I also told him that the nose bone and eardrums are particularly fragile. I turned off my phone and watched the early end of this scene coldly. What a pity. Howard didn't hit hard enough, and that scumbag Leo didn't suffer enough. Sandy's reaction today was also a bit surprising to me. She was much weaker than I had imagined, which left me feeling somewhat unsatisfied. Maybe Howard's presence kept her from showing her true colors. Sensing the quiet around her, Sandy stopped crying and looked up. Her face, smeared with blood and tears, looked pitiful and somewhat ridiculous. I curled my lips into a mocking and provocative smile. Suddenly, the innocent, doe-eyed look she usually had disappeared, replaced with a resentful and vicious glare. Staggering, she approached me. "You set this all up, didn't you?" I put on an innocent, panicked look, sounding aggrieved. "You seduced my husband and ruined my family. You even slept in my bed, and now you're blaming me." My hands were tightly clenched into fists behind my back. If she dared to touch a hair on my head today, I'd beat her senseless. I feigned fear, because I wanted to see how Leo would choose between Sandy and me. But he hesitated. At the moment Sandy moved towards me, Leo didn't budge an inch. He even looked at Sandy with a hint of pity in his eyes. I saw Leo, the man I once loved deeply, clearly for what he was. If that's the case, don't blame me for being blunt. "You bitch. Leo should have divorced you long ago," Sandy screamed, raising her hand to hit me like a madwoman. I was ready. I swung my arm and slapped her across the face. Then, I slapped her again with the back of my hand. Good hit. Seducing someone's husband and wrecking their family. How dare you act so arrogantly? Someone in the crowd shouted. Sandy seemed taken aback that I fought back. She stood there stunned, her face swelling up like a pig's head, tears welling up in her eyes full of humiliation. But she didn't dare say another word. If she dared be more arrogant, the spittle at the door could drown her. "Sandy, haven't you embarrassed yourself enough?" Howard grabbed her with such force that she stumbled and fell to the ground. "They're all bullying me, setting me up. Can't you see that, Howard?" "Howard, you're being used by that bitch Wendy. I'm so wronged. You're not even helping me. You even hit me just now, after all I've done for you." Sandy sat on the ground, wailing and sobbing. At this point, Leo finally stepped in front of me and pointed his finger at Sandy's nose, cursing her viciously. "I've told you already. Don't seduce me or wreck my family. All along, I've only loved my wife, Sandy choked on her sobs, too shocked to continue crying. Outside, police sirens wailed, and the people at the door continued to curse. Some cursed the shameless mistress, while others called out the ungrateful scumbag. There were also those who sympathized with me and Howard. Hearing the sirens and facing the double blow, Sandy was truly terrified. Her face went pale, and without grabbing her things, she prepared to run. I stretched out my foot, and she tripped and fell flat on her face. "Take off your skirt," I mocked Sandy, who was lying on the ground. Sandy was both angry and anxious, but she had no choice and took it off. I threw the skirt at her face and said in an unusually calm tone, "Don't leave what you've worn here to disgust me. Trash belongs in the trash can." The police arrived and took the four of us to the station. They took statements from each of us. In the end, we all agreed to mediation, and after signing the agreement, went our separate ways home. Soon, the incident caused quite a stir in the neighborhood. On the way back, I kept a cold face and didn't say a word to Leo. People started whispering and pointing when they saw Leo and me. They sympathized and pitied me, while their words toward Leo were full of cold sarcasm, hitting him right where it hurts. Leo was furious, but didn't dare say anything. His face kept switching between red and white. It was quite the sight. As soon as we got home, Leo dropped to his knees with a thud and clutched my legs, begging. I was wrong. Sandy seduced me. Please forgive me. I looked down at him kneeling in the mess, finding it all too funny. Let's get a divorce, I said. No, I don't agree to a divorce. We have feelings for each other. I made a mistake, but who doesn't have problems in their marriage? Let's look forward, shall we? I squatted down, prying his fingers off my legs one by one. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? Leo panicked. Large beads of sweat rolled down his swollen forehead. It was both funny and tragic. He took out his phone and sent a vicious voice message to Sandy, then deleted all her contact information right in front of me. I swear, I'll never have anything to do with her again. Leo's fierce determination scared me a little. Before getting caught, he hid it well, even blaming me for being paranoid, making it seem like I was wronging him and causing him great distress. Just last night, he and Sandy were being intimate in this house. Even 2 hours ago, when Sandy came to hit me, he didn't stand up to protect me immediately. Now, when I mention divorce, he quickly cuts ties with Sandy, switching sides right away. Does he sincerely want my forgiveness? Or is he just stalling to find a chance to kick me out later? After all, he hasn't yet gotten the premarital property gifted by my parents. All the savings are in my hands. The mortgage on the house he paid the down payment for before marriage isn't paid off either. Or maybe he thinks there's no chance with Sandy anymore. Balancing the pros and cons, he finds me still useful, thinking in this society, a cheating man who kneels and begs should naturally make the wife forgive and move on. He thought he knew me well, but he didn't realize that the moment he betrayed our marriage, I was no longer the Wendy who loved him wholeheartedly and was at his mercy. I want to see him fall into hell with my own eyes. He must pay for his mistakes. Today is just the beginning. I closed the door and went into the guest room. Today's confrontation was a spur-of-the-moment decision. When it comes to cheating, I always believed it was Leo's fault. Even if Sandy made the first move, if Leo knew how to refuse, nothing would have happened. But Sandy crossed the line by adding me on Instagram and posting a story only I could see in the early morning. She lay on my bed with a man I knew too well. Though his back was to the camera, it was clearly Leo. The caption read, "What's stolen tastes best." She was getting back at me for walking arm in arm with Leo in front of her 2 days ago, feeling abandoned in that instant. It likely reminded her of being abandoned by her own family, stirring up her sensitive and suspicious nature. So, while I was on the night shift, she couldn't wait to come to my house and exact her petty revenge. She wore my dress, slept in my bed with my man, and even flaunted it openly. So I found Howard, but I didn't show him the pictures Sandy sent me. I feared he'd get too angry, call Sandy, and refuse to come catch them together with me. Nothing is more impactful than seeing it with one's own eyes. The deepest hurt always comes from those closest to us. Silent treatment is a dull blade. It won't kill, but can make life unbearable. Leo began to change, becoming more attentive. He who never cleaned the house now made sure the place was spotless, even cleaner than before. He made elaborate breakfasts. I ate with a cold face and said not one word. While the food was good and clearly well prepared, I didn't offer any compliments. I saw him busy in the kitchen, but acted as if I didn't and turned back to the guest room. We slept in separate rooms. Our communication was minimal. If something could be said in one word, I never said 3. He made an excuse to take some time off work to spend time with me and make it up to me. Whether he was there to be with me or just for recovery, fearing embarrassment, I didn't care anymore. I went on with my life. If love was gone, I would focus on my career, but I quietly watched his changes, specifically, his physical changes. I loved sweet treats. So Leo, feeling guilty and wanting to make me happy, would always prepare sweet dishes after my shifts. I took a few symbolic bites, still saying nothing, but the coldness on my face lessened a bit. Leo was thrilled, eating with great appetite, thinking it was a sign I might forgive him. But he also started noticing that every time he finished his meal, especially when he cleaned his plate, I seemed in a better mood. His bruises and wounds healed gradually, yet he inexplicably began getting mouth ulcers, coming and going frequently. His insomnia worsened, and even increased doses of melatonin didn't help much. He'd wake up in cold sweats at night, sometimes jolting awake for no apparent reason, even with the air conditioner running at a comfortable temperature. Occasionally, he'd run a low fever, which kept recurring. Then, he started to become forgetful. The first time I talked to him since asking for a divorce was because he forgot to turn off the main gas valve in the kitchen. He couldn't find his razor in the bathroom, and after searching for a long time, I found it for him near the window. One day, when I got home from my night shift, I found that Leo had closed the door without locking it. I called him right away and yelled at him. He tried to argue back, but ended up sighing and helplessly saying he'd be more careful next time. Later, I saw him come home carrying groceries. He didn't dare to say anything and quietly went into the kitchen to start cooking. Recently, Leo would break out in hives for no apparent reason. It was extremely itchy, even in the most private areas of his body. He saw a dermatologist and got tested for allergies, but found nothing. He tried many anti-allergy medications, but his condition would still come and go. Sometimes the hives would disappear without medication, only to come back days later with no pattern, sometimes accompanied by a low fever. His physical discomfort, coupled with anxiety and insomnia, tormented him, making him restless. Seeing him lose weight and look haggard made me feel quite pleased. Are you still in touch with Sandy? I asked casually as we ate. Don't you trust me? Leo put down his chopsticks, looking angry but with lifeless eyes. That's not important. What matters is that you don't infect me. I smiled at him mockingly. A few days ago, I saw that Sandy had come to the emergency room. She kept having nosebleeds for no reason, and it took a long time to stop the bleeding. Leo's face changed drastically at my words. I'm full. I'm going to play some games, I said as he stormed into the study, coming out only after a long time. That night, when everything was quiet, I checked his browsing history on the computer. I saw searches like what causes insomnia, forgetfulness, low fever, night sweats, and mouth ulcers. What diseases can cause recurring allergies without a clear reason? What STDs are transmitted through high-risk sexual behavior? And early symptoms of HIV and its incubation period. Once someone becomes paranoid about HIV, it's like opening Pandora's box. Fear, anxiety, and despair will consume them, driving them to the brink of a breakdown. When the seed of doubt takes root in the heart, it's nearly impossible to get rid of. It grows persistently, sprouting despite all efforts. How could I miss the chance to nurture this seed? I'd use every way to water and nourish it, rushing its growth, as some diseases have a window period from 6 weeks to 3 months. Time is limited. The next day after work, I noticed scratches on Howard's neck as if from a confrontation with Sandy. Sandy's recent posts showed signs of this. She cut her hair short and covered her right face with it, looking dejected. The caption read, "Starting over." She had been sending me nasty messages, flaunting her and Leo's intimate photos. Yes, they had been meeting secretly again. Once a cheater, always a cheater. I recalled Leo's tearful plea when I demanded a divorce. It seemed ridiculous to me. Men lie effortlessly. His begging was just a stalling tactic. If I didn't come between them, it would be a waste of Leo's Oscar-worthy acting and Sandy's efforts to provoke me. Leo's paranoia about HIV had reached a critical point. With a little nudge from me, he confronted Sandy, finding an outlet for his anger and the root of his problem. He wouldn't let Sandy off easily this time. Her covered face might just be the result of their confrontation. I was in a good mood and made a feast that night, knowing a thunderstorm was forecasted. After dinner, Howard was unusually thirsty, drinking frequently. Despite wearing light clothing, he felt hot and restless. Can you sit still for a bit? I asked, browsing on my phone, but watching Howard intently. It's going to rain. It's too stuffy and hot, he said, adjusting the air conditioner. Sweat dripped down his face. I said nothing, grabbed a long shirt from the bedroom, and put it on. Tonight, I'd share the bedroom with Howard. Since his symptoms started, his desire had plummeted. Even when he tried to be nice or initiate intimacy, my reminder of his time with Sandy would extinguish his desire. I'm tired. I'm going to bed, Howard said angrily, going to the bedroom. I knew he was mad at himself. When I entered the bedroom, he was tossing and turning, unable to sleep. I pretended to sleep, but stayed alert. He got up several times, either to use the bathroom or drink water. Finally, he quieted down and drifted to sleep. Suddenly, the room lit up like daylight, a flash of lightning, followed by a loud thunderclap. Howard, finally asleep, was jolted awake, sitting up in fright, pale and drenched in cold sweat, gasping for breath. 10. At this moment, another lightning bolt streaked across the sky outside the window. The intense light made the pallor and fear on his face vividly clear. Thunder roared. Howard shivered. The thunder was like a rampaging dragon, tearing open the unsettled clouds. An enraged rainstorm began to pour, pounding on the window with a furious patter. To Howard, it felt like demons from hell, draining the color from his face, leaving him ashen and pale. He turned to look at me. I pretended to keep sleeping, subtly adjusting my breathing to sound long and deep. He just sat there, staring blankly, not moving an inch. I had no idea what he was thinking. His eyes were vacant and lifeless. Outside, the rain was still raging. I knew the last string in his heart had snapped on this stormy night. The next day, Howard had a high fever that wouldn't go away. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes rambling nonsense. I wanted to take him to the hospital, but when he was lucid, he stubbornly refused, insisting he just caught a chill last night. Fear of doctors, it's truly terrifying, but I liked it. I gave him some fever medicine. Luckily, I was off that day, so I could stay home and keep an eye on him. If things got really bad, I'd call 911 right away. I wasn't exactly a saint, meticulously taking care of him. I was there to make sure I could send him where he needed to go personally. By evening, his fever had finally broken. His face wasn't flushed anymore, but he suddenly became very irritable, nitpicking the porridge I painstakingly made. In the end, he turned his back on me, refusing to eat. Might as well let the fever finish him off. But when he was alone, he started to mumble to himself, feeling down and depressed. Sometimes, his eyes grew vacant. I'd call him, but it would take him a good while to snap out of his thoughts. Sometimes he'd respond, but sometimes he'd just look at me blankly and then drop his head again, lost in thought. I recorded all his behavior today. Watching him being all crazy and depressed, my heart danced with joy. Things were working. Soon, I wouldn't need to wear this mask under the same roof as him. These past 2 weeks had felt like years. Leo didn't want to go to the hospital, but he had no choice against me. I played the good wife, patiently taking him for all sorts of tests, head CT, chest CT, MRI. All came back normal. I even took him to the lab for blood tests. It was the weekend, so the results wouldn't be ready till Monday. Since the blood draw, Leo had been really tense. Some folks are scared of bad results, but still cling to hope, avoiding doctors to feel better. In their minds, no tests mean no problems. Next, I took him to the psych department, showing the doctor last night's recordings. The doctor ran a series of relevant scales on Leo. Leo was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, moderate. He insisted he wasn't sick and didn't want to take meds. On that, I actually agreed. All I wanted was a record at the psych department to set up for what was to come. Bipolar disorder isn't that scary. Wendy, you're a doctor too. Besides therapy, you know how crucial regular meds are. I wrote the prescription, taking it's up to you. The hospital insisted, so I complied reluctantly. But inside, I was overjoyed. I wanted to laugh, but couldn't. I got Leo some sick leave, claiming he had recurring fevers the local hospital couldn't diagnose, and I wanted to take him elsewhere. With the pandemic, everyone's sensitive about fevers. Leo's boss quickly agreed, assuring us not to rush back until his condition was clear. I did all this to scare Sandy. After we returned from the hospital, even before the STDs and HIV tests came back, Leo's condition worsened. Sometimes, he'd wander around or start singing wildly, then fall into deep, mumbling depression, his eyes empty, like a living corpse. Sometimes, he'd ask for meds, but then suddenly throw them all away, even showing suicidal tendencies. In the end, I had to send Leo to hospital, our local psych ward, using his medical records. After leaving the hospital, I called my mother-in-law. That's when I learned Leo's father had died from mental illness. Leo had witnessed his father's suicide by hanging at age 10. I'm a materialist, an atheist. Some mental illnesses, from a medical standpoint, are hereditary, but bipolar disorder isn't necessarily so. If he hadn't cheated, breaking our marriage and love, even if he fell into a deep depression, I'd have been confident enough to stick it out with him. Even selling the house and car to travel and lift his spirits would have been fine. The hospital called me many times later, saying Leo wanted to see me. I never went. I was busy filing for divorce. Because of Leo's mental condition, the divorce was more complicated than usual, but I was prepared. Our relationship was long dead. I provided all the evidence of his cheating, listed chronologically. Of course, this evidence was legal, and the court accepted it. From my online record of catching him with Sandy to the video neighbors took, police mediation records, and Sandy's photos, videos, and chat records of her with Leo, including his medical records, prescriptions, videos of me playing the good wife, and clips of me hiding in fear during his bipolar episodes, crying quietly. In the end, the court granted the divorce. Most of the property was given to me, but considering Leo's mental health issues, he was given a small portion as well. Leo's mother used all of his share to pay for his hospital bills. This money would keep him in the hospital for a long, long time. One day after the divorce, I took Leo's lab report and made a point to visit him. The doctor said his condition was worsening. He had even started refusing to eat. I saw Leo curled up in the corner of the hospital room. Despite always being clean, he ignored the dirty, messy hospital gown. He was picking at the wall with his fingers, his eyes hollow, murmuring, "I'm not sick. I'm not sick." It had only been a few months, but he looked so much older, utterly drained of his former energy. I chuckled softly. "Of course, you're not sick. What illness could you have?" Leo seemed to hear my voice. He lifted his head in shock. When he saw it was me, a glimmer of light flashed in his dull eyes, then quickly turned to a furious glare. "Wendy, you planned all this, didn't you?" I shrugged innocently, smiling. "What does this have to do with me?" Leo shook his head, thinking for a bit, then rushed at me like a madman. But the iron security door of the hospital room was locked, leaving only a small window. "Then why do I feel so awful? Do I have AIDS?" I took out the lab report and waved it in front of him. "HIV negative. You're perfectly fine." "Then why?" He began to mumble, unable to understand. I smirked and explained slowly. "It's because of your diet that you have those weird symptoms." Why was I feverish, sweating, forgetful, and allergic? I laughed lightly. I turned off the air conditioning at night. It gets hot in midsummer, right? And as for the fever, with the 9-story building's draft at night, catching a chill is easy. As for the forgetfulness, I chuckled. I deliberately moved your things around and turned off the main gas valve in the kitchen. I didn't explain the rashes, because they had nothing to do with me. I also didn't say that melatonin's effect on insomnia is limited. And Sandy, she kept having random nosebleeds without any obvious cause. I smiled but said nothing. I wouldn't tell him there's a condition called nasal endometriosis. It means the endometrial tissue is in the nasal cavity, causing nosebleeds with every menstrual cycle. But the bipolar disorder, you definitely have that. I finished with a smug, triumphant smile. "Wendy, you bitch. I'll kill you. I'm not sick. Let me out." Leo screamed in the room, punching the glass until his hands bled. The doctors and nurses rushed over. "Quick, room 32 is having another manic episode." I pretended to be scared, but watched coldly as the nurse injected a sedative into Leo. He soon stopped struggling, slowly losing consciousness, and finally became completely quiet. When I left the hospital, I was humming a happy tune. Whether sick or not, no one would believe a mental patient who says they're not sick. Several days later, after work, I saw a man carrying a girl into the emergency room. "Doctor, help. She drank pesticide." I recognized the man immediately. It was Howard, Sandy's boyfriend. Wearing a mask, I took a peek into the emergency room. It was definitely Sandy. She was foaming at the mouth, barely breathing. Even from afar, I could smell the strong garlic odor of pesticide. I learned from Howard that after the cheating incident, he broke up with Sandy and took back the engagement money. That's when he found out Sandy had used the money to pay for her brother's house down payment. With the engagement money reclaimed, Sandy's status at home plummeted. She became the humiliated daughter who disgraced her parents, a useless sister who couldn't help her brother. Around that time, Leo was on leave. Sandy's nasal bleeding was on and off, causing her to doubt herself more and more. She thought she had an incurable disease and kept coming to the hospital for blood tests. Eventually, Sandy couldn't take it anymore. She kept asking Howard to reconcile, but he refused. Today, she threatened suicide by drinking pesticide. The emergency room door closed, and the doctors and nurses were doing their best to save her. As for Sandy, whether she lived or died, it was no longer my concern.